Michael, thank you so much for jumping on the AIM podcast.
Thanks for having me. Stoked.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun episode. Like I briefly mentioned to you before we started recording, you are our second Olympian, but our first swimming Olympian, which that's super exciting for us. So we appreciate you
Let's
coming on.
go. Nice. Thanks for having me. I should have brought the gold medal out.
Hey, let's bring it out, man. No, I honestly, and like we can joke around, but I need swim lessons, dude. Like after finishing my college basketball career, I was like, man, I want to explore some different styles of training, and swimming's always been something I've enjoyed, but I've never mastered or really been taught the technique of like how to
Right.
breathe properly and how to be an efficient swimmer. So
Well, and that's the thing is swimming is so like anti-human movement. Like we're not naturally comfortable in the water. And so yeah, we'll get you. Just come out to Coronado. We got a pool. We'll throw you in. We'll suffer together.
I love it. We did have a guy, Don Tran. He's a former Marine Raider, and he has this business called Deep End Fitness, and essentially they don't swim like laps, and they're not. Have you heard of them?
I know the deep end guys, so I'm buddies with Prime Hall, who also does a
Okay.
bunch of stuff out here with them. Yeah, that and the torpedo league.
Yeah, dude, that's crazy. So that's like a whole other end of the spectrum. You're
Yeah,
you're racing for gold medals. They're like trying to kill you with your
yeah,
underwater.
literally. But it's cool seeing them because it changes people's minds to like that. What can you do underwater? You know, like even in the fitness world, there's so many new things coming out. I mean, I too like the way we train. We'll probably get into it a little bit, but everything's so specific to going fast and swimming fast. But I've noticed now coming off of the Olympic Games, multiple world championships, there's a lot of things that I think a lot of stones unturned. And like seeing like things like that, deep in fitness, all of that. There's so many things we can learn from each other, which is pretty exciting.
No doubt. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's when I found out a little bit more about what they do and why they do it, and even just like the community aspect, what they've built around it's so fascinating.
Yeah, no, it's fun. We love that.
I love it, man. Well, listen, we have a fun conversation planned for today. I mean, you have been incredibly successful at a very young age, and obviously, I know you're probably not content, and you have a lot
No,
more
never.
aspirations to continue to achieve. But I would love to kind of just start at the basics of your story and kind of work through it, and then and kind of unpack some things. But who was the first, like, who taught you how to swim? How did you even get in the water in the first place?
Yeah, so it's funny. I can't say that I remember who taught me. I remember going through our like learn to swim program back in when this was when we lived in Aberdeen, South Dakota. So like very early days. But there's photos of me when my parents were born and raised South African, and we had a farm. And so there's photos of me when I was 2 years old, just floating, swimming. And my parents have told me every time we went anywhere where there was water, I gravitated towards it. So I always loved the water and had this kind of natural feel for it. And I learned to swim when I was about 7 and quickly kind of progressed through that learning phase and this competitive nature that it very much runs in the Andrew family. We are all like crazy competitive. And we have challenges with each other constantly. Sometimes it's unhealthy, but it's one of those things that I was able to then turn it into the pool at a pretty young age and started competing right away when I was about 8 years old.
That's cool. I read something where, and I would love to hear the full story because I'm sure you can provide really interesting detail. Your dad ended up buying like a basically building you a pool, right? Is that kind of what
Yeah.
happened when you were
So
young?
so we've done this twice. We've done this. We did this in South Dakota, and we did this again in Kansas when we had moved and left South Dakota. So what it started out is we swam in the local team. You know, we enjoyed swimming. We were like learning and getting our grips on terms of like what the swimming world looked like. But we dealt with a lot of kickback because we were this foreign family that came in and we didn't really know everybody. We didn't rub people the wrong way, but I find that people aren't very quick to celebrate success when it's fast and it's new and it's from a family that tends to do things differently. And so we kind of dealt with a lot of kickback from local families and like the local club. And so my dad decided, and my parents being the crazy swim family that we are, they're like, well, we see a gift, we see a talent, we want to cultivate this. You know, we feel like God's given me this for a reason. So let's, be deliberate with it. And so we started researching and reaching out to other coaches and other facilities. We started swimming at YMCA's, and then we quickly got kicked out of facilities. So we were like, what the heck? Like, we don't have a pool to train in. This is ridiculous. And we thought, well, screw that. We're going to build our own pool. And we ended up finding there's a plot downtown, right, like literally Main Street of Aberdeen, South Dakota. The neighbors across from us was the whole police department. And this was it was an old nightclub, and then a few like weird restaurants that were connected to like a barbecue joint, but it was all being condemned. So the building was filled with asbestos, condemned, just falling apart. And we ended up buying it off this auction for way cheaper than it was worth. And we renovated the whole thing, turned it into just this incredible, one side of it was a swim facility, a pool house. We opened like a smoothie bar. The other was like a giant gym where we did all of our dryland training. My mom had her office, and in the back corner, we built our house. We had like these loft beds and these crazy, it's just like insane. And so from there, we ended up starting our own swim team. And that's when the drama kind of kicked in, is because a lot of other swimmers knew us and knew we were doing well. And they're like, well, this is kind of exciting. And so they started coming and swimming for us. And, but that was kind of the journey. That was our first pool, was in South Dakota. And then once we had left and gone out to Kansas, we decided, like, we were so spoiled having a pool really in our, not even front yard, just in our house. And, you know, it was funny because it was never anything fancy, anything spectacular. It was very budgeted, very homemade. We had really most of my career up until I was about 15 or so. The pool I trained in, it was a bladder pool. So it was 25 meters, but the walls on each end bowed. So I didn't have a flat wall that I was doing flip turns. And I kind of look back at it and I wonder, like, maybe my turns underwater are so garbage because of these funny things. But it was cool because, you know, whatever it was, we had a dream, we had a plan, we wanted to execute it. So nothing could get in our way, and we just made it work, which is pretty fun looking back at.
I mean, dude, that's an incredible story. Like, that is so cool. I love that. Was it like a process? It sounds like it happened very quickly, but like, was this something you guys were thinking about for a while, just trying to figure out the best way, like best course of action?
Yeah, so there's a few things that, you know, we kind of plan out over time, but I think it was one of those things where the moment a problem arose and we felt like, okay, we're dealing with something here, this kickback, how are we going to eliminate this situation, or how are we going to overcome and execute? And at the time, we were very fortunate financially. My mom had a rocking business, and so we're like, hey, like, we can do this. And my sister was swimming at the time, and so my dad had the freedom to become our coach and to learn. And he was very studious, and he would always constantly research and learn and see these things. And so it was something we naturally fell into. Because early days, like, a lot of people, I think they originally saw like, oh, this family's so intense and so crazy. They're like forcing their kids into these things. They're trying to make it, you know, like sometimes, you know, parents vicariously live through their children in a way it's like pushing them into something. But this is something that me as an athlete, even though I was very young, I voiced this love and desire for the sport. And so I'm just very fortunate that I had parents that were crazy enough to act on that. And then from there, it kind of grew into what it was. And that, when I turned 14, I had an opportunity to go pro. And so I had been breaking a bunch of national records and kind of creating a name for myself as this new phenom. And it allowed for me to then make an even bigger and more controversial decision in terms of going pro at such a young age. And that's when the onslaught opened up.
Yeah. I want to dive into that, but before we even get there,
Yeah.
a question I had for you, and I'm curious, like, I'd love to learn more about the dynamic. Like, obviously your family was extremely supportive, was very involved. What was that like, having your father as a coach and, you know, someone that you look up to and love so much in like a father relationship, but also be very kind of intentional on the business side or the coaching serious side?
Yeah.
How was that dynamic?
It's challenging. I'm very grateful that my dad and I think very similarly, at least in the way we operate or deal with stress. And so we don't keep it tucked. We'll talk about it. We'll discuss. And I think I've noticed that most in my family and my relationships is it's so important to communicate clearly and early so that things don't have room to fester. And, so we do deal with our challenges. We deal with things where it's like, and this was something my dad used to say a lot, is he used to claim that he was the assistant coach and I was the head coach because I'm the one in the water and I know how my body feels, but it was up to me to communicate exactly what was going on in my head so that he could then remedy as a coach. But we've since changed that, just in terms of me being able to trust him as my coach as the full on. And there is a give and take, and a big part of it is I have to give up not my voice to it, but I have to trust him like I would trust any other coach. And I think what was so special about the dynamic we share is nobody loves me more than my father. And same with my mom, is like, I know that they're going to do everything they can to sacrifice, but not even just sacrifices. They want me to succeed and to become a healthy individual. And then one day, like, lead on to, it's like, we know swimming's not the be all end all. It's just a part of the journey. Mm-hmm. And that was really cool because it puts, and it's not that we ever hear or listen to what the naysayers is, because we dealt with a lot of flack for the way we did things, but because even though we saw those things and we understood it and we're like, okay, people don't fully understand why we're doing this, it gave us the freedom to just be and to do it, so that then over time they get to see the story, they get to see the passion and the purpose behind swimming and why we love it so much. And then we've, since then, been able to grow a platform to where we have this brand that is family oriented, family based, and we love each other and work well together. But yeah, no, it does. I wouldn't recommend for every family to work closely together, because it is weird, especially when money's involved and dealing with sponsors and things like that. But at the same time, it's one of those things that I think if you can navigate it with a healthy perspective and know that we kind of all operate under the same purpose and we love for each other to all succeed, and there's clear boundaries set, like very clear boundaries, and that's been something we've been learning about setting in newer seasons. It's just as I've gotten older, things have changed to where we can't communicate like when I was a 12-year-old, because I'm an adult now. And so that's, we just evolve and we move along with the times, and we let love kind of be the driving force of our work and relationship outside of the pool.
That's so fascinating, dude. And you look at that dynamic and how some people try to navigate it in a normal situation, but when you take it to an Olympic level where there's just so many more pressures and opportunities and people trying to get in the mix, it's just, I can't imagine how difficult yet focused you would need to be in order to just have like a very strong relationship. But obviously centered around love makes sense.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. And I think too, what's cool to realize is it's not just like we welcome people from outside of our family to speak into our process and our journey. So I've had countless mentors and people to help with, even like pastors, spiritual health, other athletes that I've gotten to know and get to be friends with that have gone through this process, who've won Olympic medals and realize it doesn't define who you are, and I get to learn a lot because I'm around it. And so that's one thing that we've been very grateful for is, as much as we have learned a lot of the lessons the hard way through trial and error, we've been able to skip a lot of the hardship because I've taken the counsel of others. And so that's a pretty special thing to recognize, is it's not just the family unit as much as it is like the driving force.
100%.
Yeah.
As you started to gain momentum in the sport, obviously at a very young age, there's a lot going on. When did you see the shift where it was obviously still joy? I'm sure you still have a lot of passion and love for the sport, but where did you see the shift where you started to monetize and market yourself as a brand and like that complicated layer step into the equation?
Definitely. So I guess the first kind of stepping stone to that was when I turned 14. So when I was 14, I signed with a supplement company, and it wasn't even for money, literally no money on the table, just product. And it was so funny because people were like, oh, his parents are stealing all his money. I'm like, you guys, if I was making money, I would not be letting it go. and so it's one of those things where I was like, it's so funny because people make these assumptions and do whatever they want and they run with it. But that's when I started thinking about it, like, okay, cool. Like I'm a professional athlete. So now I've got the title. And with that, I had to give up NCAA swimming and high school swimming. And then I was like, okay, so what do I do now as a pro swimmer? Since I'm not just an age grouper breaking records, how do I, as a pro, kind of carry this momentum? And for me, a lot of it was just continue swimming fast. So the mindset was, I'm going to have to now continue to prove my worth so that I can earn from it. And as much as that's true, it's not always the most healthy frame of mind, because I started to go into competitions being so afraid to fail, because now I'm a professional swimmer racing other 14-year-olds who are not. So I therefore cannot lose to these guys. Otherwise, it was like a wasted intention on the company, or other companies look at me and be like, oh, he's just a flash in the pan type of thing.
Wow.
Gratefully, I had gone through that season. I had swum well. I had seasons, highs and lows, just like any athlete. But I was fortunate enough to have some really cool mentors along the way who had helped me kind of get out of that frame of thinking and just start to find that same love for the sport, which was, focusing on the why. So why do I do something? And as much as it is the goals and being able to have the shiny things and do all these fun stuff and like travel the world and the relationships, I had to recognize my original love and my original why for it was just the feeling I get of achieving and being able to swim fast, because it's one of those things that most people don't get to experience if they don't keep their passion into like perspective. And I lost that perspective with recognition and whatnot. And then going back to your question, is as that kind of progressed, I moved through the years. Around 16, 17 is when I started to, well, 15 actually, really. 15 is I signed a deal with Adidas or Adidas for the swim portion of their company. And I was kind of the face of that with a friend of mine overseas. And that's when I first started making like real money as a 15-year-old. And I was like, well, this is pretty sick. And looking back at it, it's like, it wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough to me where I was like, well, I don't have any bills. Like I'm just rolling in it.
Yeah.
And it was cool. It was really fun and it was motivating. And then we started to travel and we started to race a lot. And because of the way I train, I'm able to do that. And then that's kind of when the brand started to continue building. So after going from our age group days, breaking national records, and then into like this 15 through 18 year category, I had started to break some world junior records. I swam at my first world championship since when I was 17. I ended up winning gold at that worlds, just like a crazy whirlwind. And then that kind of skyrocketed me into now, okay, like I've proven myself not to just be a fast age grouper. I've kind of stood the test of time, and now it's up to me to, as a senior outside of these age group categories, to now hold with the big guys. And mentally, everyone was like, oh, this kid's, he's still a kid. Like, and I was still a kid. I was still thinking like a kid. I still looked like a kid. And that's when I kind of shifted, and it's now become focusing on like the social media side of things. I started vlogging and making YouTube videos. And then leading up to Tokyo, I had kind of set up a very good base with the MA brand through partnerships in the past, and then other people who have helped me create this kind of brand image, and then building upon that. And so it's been pretty fun. It's cool to look, even like just talking to you, kind of piecing it and looking at it like through a timeline, how that kind of progressed and where we're at now. And I feel like even where we are now as a 23-year-old, and I say we because this is not at all just a me thing, it takes a village, but as a 23-year-old, I feel like there's so much still in terms of branding and stuff. And it's not just that. It's like I want to swim fast and do all that.
Sure.
But it's, especially in swimming, and I speak to a lot of my friends and athletes about this, is you can be a very fast swimmer and still make absolutely no money to support a family and stuff. You have to now be fast. You have to be fast all the time, traveling in the eyes, and then on social media doing your thing. And so it's kind of building out this whole package. And that's something I've been really focused on trying to do, as well as juggling the training. Because at the end of the day, that whole motto, eat, sleep, swim, it's there for a reason, and a lot of it makes sense, and it's kind of sad. But in order to be the absolute best and to break world records and do those things that I desire to do, you have to give up a lot. And so that's kind of the season I'm in now, is getting back to giving up some things so that I can gain some things.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think it's cool to see when athletes have the opportunity, or I guess the blessing, just to create a team like you're referencing that can really help you maximize your opportunity, your platform, what you've built on all the hard work and success that you've put in to be a very elite athlete, but then to also make the most of that, reach, and whether that be,
Right.
providing value to brands or to your audience or to the people that
Absolutely.
support you. I think there's a way to do it in which you can still be super successful if the system's in place for you to kind of have that team, which is
100%.
cool.
Yeah, no, it is really fun. And I think what's really special too about it is I look, and I don't ever, and I never want this, and this isn't even out of pride, it's just I never want to look back at my career and think all I had achieved was records and fame or gold medals, like all of that will be forgotten and disappear at some point. Um, but I want to be able to take what I've learned and be able to give that back to people. And so that's what's kind of cool now, is I am, as much as we're just getting started, is I'm in a stage where I've learned quite a bit over the almost decade of being a professional swimmer. And I can now help a lot of people navigate and avoid a lot of the pitfalls I faced head on.
Sure. No, that makes sense. I want to dive into the mindset of this, because I just, man, I think there's so much value that you can bring to this conversation from that perspective. As you got in, started having success from an early age, how did you mentally handle the pressure? I know you referenced it, but I'd love to go a little deeper. Like, I can't imagine being able to stay focused on what your main objective is while all this is coming at you and you
Yeah.
have all the pressures for all the races. What was that process like, and how did you navigate it mentally?
Well, the process was painful. um, and not painful, like looking back, it's like, okay, it wasn't really as bad as it seemed in the moment. But if you're an athlete, anyone that's gone through sport or even difficult situations in life, is like, it's always way harder when you're in the thick. And it shapes you and it creates this level of thickness. And so I think one thing I'm really grateful for is I was able to learn very quickly through those difficult seasons, because I put myself in difficult, or actually, I wouldn't even say myself. My parents put me in difficult situations, whether it was race schedules, travel meets, or certain events I hated doing, because it stretched me, it challenged me. And when I faced a challenge, this is something that I was kind of raised to do, is I would go through it. I would face it head on. Even if I didn't want to, I was fearful. And sometimes we pulled out and sometimes we just pushed through it. But I'm able to then assess after the fact, be like, okay, what went wrong? What went right? How do I now prepare myself and that comes around? Whether it was a mental thing or a physical thing, is kind of being able to take a step back and see everything for what it is. And then the other was a spiritual side. And the reason I say spiritual side is, like, I believe God's given me a gift to swim fast. And what I've recognized as an athlete, especially, my worth and my value in life and on this earth is not to swim fast, not to break records, not to have world, like, whatever. Like, that's awesome. And that's my fleshly desire. My human desire is to be the absolute best, untouchable. And it's great because I have this competitive edge that I won't stop at anything to do it. At the end, if I don't ever achieve anything and able to love well, show up motivated, dedicate myself to performance, and live a life that glorified God in a way through my sport, that's an achievement in itself and a complete success. And so there's two sides to the coin. And I think it's being able to find that balance to where it's like, I can have this competitive edge, but once I hit the wall, I can celebrate or I can mourn. I can be sad and be super glad. But at the same time, I have to be able to say, okay, Thanks God for the result. Thank you for what this is doing. Thank you for the people this has drawn me closer to. Thank you for the experiences. Now we move on to the next thing. And that was something, and it's something I have to constantly tell myself, constantly have to learn, like relearn always. But when I started to think like that, it gave me this freedom from fear, because all performances, and this is even to like going into how our brain works, is when we start to fear an outcome or fear not executing perfectly, we take these subconscious movements and these habits that we've created in our training programs out of this healthy state, and we become kind of like, like when a baby starts to think, it's like we just forget and we mess things up and we become mechanical, or we cripple ourselves with fear before the race and we end up not executing like we can. And that, having that perspective gave me the ability to go in there knowing, okay, I can be nervous, but I'm going to turn this into excitement. I'm going to speak positively towards it. I'm going to have a desire to do well, but an understanding that it doesn't define who I am. And that gave me the freedom in every event to step up and be like, okay, this guy next to me, cool, he's fast, he's really fast, but I'm not going to swim his race. I'm not going to get out of my lane. I'm going to focus on what I can control. I'm going to race. And at the end of the day, whoever hits the wall first hits the wall first. And I'm going to celebrate whether it's a win or loss. And that was huge. And that's actually kind of what leads me to my first world championships. This is when it all kind of clicked for me, because I had been struggling a lot going into that year. I had just missed the Olympic team by about a half a second. I came fourth by 1/100th of a second. Top two goes to the Olympics. And being a 17-year-old, I was like, dang, like, would have been so sick to be a 17-year-old Olympian, And that's one of those things where people were like, they didn't expect it. They kind of had written me off, and I was like, whatever, okay, cool. Like, and I swam well the week leading up to it. Had an amazing meet, dropped a bunch of time, broke a few world junior records, but I missed the team. So I had a hard time celebrating it. I was really sad. And later in the year, I got a call and I was like, hey, would you like to fill a spot on the short course world championship team in Canada? One of our athletes can't go. And so I swam the 200 IM, 100 IM, and the 50 breaststroke. I remember the first day of the meet, I added 5 seconds in my 200 IM, just sucked, like so bad. And I was so like in my head, like, oh my goodness, I've never seen an athlete show up and do this terrible. And from there, I had this weird, like, I remember speaking to my parents and praying on the bus ride and being like, okay, like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I here? What's the goal? What's the plan? Like, I know I'm maybe not fully prepared or whatever, like, but I'm here and I have to make the most of this opportunity. Went through the 50 breasts. I think I ended up coming 9th, just missing the final to Cody Miller or something. And all I had left was the 100 IM on this last couple days of the meet. And to me, I was like, sick. This is such a fun event. One, it's not an Olympic event. There's no pressure. I was the fastest American by far. And I remember going into the prelims, just like, let's just go for it. Like, do whatever we can. I remember breaking the world junior record. Prelims, I broke the world junior record again in semis, and I was the top seed going into finals. And on the side of me was, and I was 17, I was like, this is crazy. I knew some of the guys because I'd been racing the World Cups with them. And it was funny because only like 2 or 3 weeks prior, the guy 2 lanes over from me, Vladimir Morozov, had broken the world record in the 100 IM by like just obliterated it. And his best time was over a second and a half fast. I mean, I'm like in my head, there's no way I'm going to win this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to race, not thinking, not looking. I'm just going to race. And I had one of these, I call it a Holy Spirit swim, where I dove in and everything was perfect. Everything connected. And I remember on my last turn with a 25 to go, I turned and I saw Shin Mishura and Daya Sato, the 2 Japanese swimmers, behind me. And I'm like, I'm winning this. Like, I'm in the lead. And I pushed off the wall, and it was just like, and I said, like, I go balls to the walls. And I literally, last 25, just gave it everything I can. It's my worst stroke. I end up finishing. I hit the wall. I don't even look up. I hit the wall, and I hear them say, world champion, Michael Andrew. And I turn around slowly just because I don't like really believe it. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, this is insane. And that was one of the first races where I fully had no real fear because it wasn't expected. I didn't put that on myself. And that's where you allow for your body to just go. Because we are all capable of it. And I think that's what's so funny is you look at the Olympics, you look at the Olympic trials, and these are the meets where athletes perform the worst, except for your few standouts. You know, most people do not drop time. A lot of people, very few people break world records. And it's because we become so fearful of failing on this one day every 4 years that we put so much emphasis on it. And I was able to kind of crack the code in that small moment and realize it's just swimming. And it sounds super cliche, but it gave me that freedom to just race. And so I try and replicate that all the time. And a lot of times I mess it up, and a lot of times I figure it out. But it's one of those things, the more you do it, the more you realize that it's just swimming, you have that freedom to just race.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing though. And it's super helpful because I know anyone listening to this can apply some version of that to what they're dealing with. Cause it's so true, bro. Like, and I love that you reference your faith. I think it's super important. But when you really do kind of just put things in perspective of, you know, what does it truly mean? What is it truly weighted? And I think as human beings, we can get easily consumed in allowing things to hold more weight than they really have.
Right.
And you put in so much hard work. That's never to, you know, not acknowledge all the work you put into this race. And it's really important and it holds a lot of value. But at the end of the day, it's a swim race, right?
Exactly.
And so I think just being able to have that mature mindset of understanding there's something so much bigger there that you're doing it for is really, really powerful. And then I think, like you're saying, like that's going to allow you to perform in that moment with less stress and freedom to do what you're called to do and then hopefully have the best outcome possible.
Right. No, 100%. And I think I'm very fortunate. You know, I feel just very blessed to have learned what I have and to have connected with the people around me so that I can have these opportunities. And, you know, it leads to me getting to speak to people like you who are excited to, you know, discover and figure out, well, how do we unlock human performance and how do we, you know, be able to find that, you know, take ambition and turn it into achievement. And sometimes it doesn't hit, it doesn't, you know, work, but that doesn't mean you don't have another shot later in life.
100%. You bring up ambition. Like this is obviously a big theme of the podcast. I love talking to the different people who have been high achievers and had a lot of success in their life, but I'd love to unpack how your mindset stays motivated and focused to continue to achieve more. Yeah. And, you know, you accomplishing so much so quickly. I would love to hear, you know, what your thought process is on how you continue to seek after, you know, working hard, staying motivated, disciplined to like go after more things when you've already gotten so much.
Right. So it's interesting. It's good. It's a really good question. So for me, it's two parts. So right now where I'm at is coming off of the Olympic Games and it's crazy. It feels like forever ago. So this was about a year, almost, a little over a year ago. And I did not have the Olympics I was hoping to. I had gone in the favorite in one event in the 200 IM. I was really on paper meant to win that. I was a medal contender in the 100 breaststroke and medal contender in the 50 free. And so I had a massive schedule on my table and I ended up coming fourth in the 100 breast by a little bit. I came fourth in the 50 free by 5/100ths, would have gotten me silver. And then the 200 IM, I kind of tanked the last 50 and ended up coming fifth, I believe, or sixth. And so there was a lot of very low moments and a lot of things I had faced at the games that I didn't think I was going to, and I wasn't prepared for. But going into that last day, I had this gift of a relay, and I had earned this spot and I got to swim in that final relay. We broke the world record out of lane 1 and we got to celebrate what this meet was. And for me, it was really interesting because I didn't see the gold as a huge thing to be celebrated. It was more like, okay, this is an awesome motivator. This is a blessing and a gift to keep the fire in the belly. And it's not that I wouldn't have still had that fire, but it was cool because it would have really sucked to leave with nothing, you know, it would have been very deflating. And even leaving with the gold, I felt pretty deflated for quite a while. And it took me about 11 weeks of doing nothing, surfing, hanging with friends, like just processing to then reassess and be like, okay, what's next? We've got Paris 3 years from now. We've got a bunch of world championships because COVID really messed up our schedule anyway. And so we've got a lot of opportunity. And so, you know, here I sit now after evaluating and looking at what the Olympics was or any other performance. I do this for everything, is how do I now take that and what's the goal moving forward? And so, you know, I stay motivated one by the taking the performances for what they are and then figuring out, okay, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? How do I now turn that into motivation and move on to the next one? What's the next goal? And so I'm very goal driven. I love to write down my goals. And a project I'm working on now is a bit of an art project where I'm going to write down all of the world records that I want to break and those times up and frame them and have them on the wall so I see them every day. And as I work and I get closer to them, eventually I will break them. And then I want to create some sort of piece where I take the suit that I broke that record in, frame it, and then auction it off or put it in a Hall of Fame, the swimming Hall of Fame, or whatever it is. And so it's like this fun little thing that's kind of outside of swim, but it's a daily reminder as to why I'm doing this. You know, not that we always need that, but it is good to have, you know, very clear, concise goals, and even with a time frame. And I think that's something, if people can take anything from this, is write down your goals and be as detailed as possible. Because when you're training at whatever time in the morning or doubling whatever days, you know, having those things when you're feeling sore, like even, what was this? This was like Thursday. I woke up, it was like day 4 back in the pool. And I'm like, my body hurts so bad. I do not want to get out of bed and swim for another 3 hours, just grinding through it. Even though I knew, okay, like I'm probably going to not hit pace. It's going to feel terrible. Mentally, I'm going to be like, oh, look, I'm just swimming slower and slower. Why am I doing this? But I had to make a mental decision to not listen to the body, to say, okay, like, why are we doing this? Like, what's the end goal? And then you'll stand up on the blocks and be like, okay, like I did the work and now I can race confidently. And so that's kind of what drives me, is a lot of that motivation. Understand we have finite amount of time here on earth, even more finite in terms of our career or how long our body's going to work for us to really achieve those crazy standards. And it's up to me to be proactive and, you know, having huge goals, as much as they may seem crazy to others. The more I speak it, the more I start to believe it, and then I internalize that, and I'm able to go into training and know, okay, like this is what I'm working towards and I can hit it. And, you know, on the other side, it's like, if it doesn't happen, so what? I still tried. Cool. Would be doing, but that's why we're here.
I love that, dude. And I think, you know, you talk about goals, like that's, oh,
I think we're good. Can you hear me still?
yeah, I got you now.
Okay, perfect.
No, you're all good. No, you talk about goals, like, dude, it's so true. It's like people say they want to work hard and they want to put in the hours and the grind, but like if you don't have a clear like north star of where you're headed, like you're saying, not, you know, if you don't necessarily get there, it's not the end of the world. You're going to learn through the process, but you still have to have something you're headed towards, or else you're just going, you know, full force in all these different directions. You're not going to get there. So I love what you're doing, bro. That project sounds super cool, man, and I cannot wait to see you just tear it apart, dude. You're going to crush it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. My sister's an artist and she's got all the creative genes in the family, but it'll be a fun little art project for me, and maybe I'll get her involved and see what we can do. But it's cool because I have the water perspective. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you now. Sorry, lagged for a second.
No, you're good. Yeah,
um,
I can
are you
close
good?
some. Yeah, perfect.
All right, sweet. No, man, that's awesome. That's super cool. I want to chat real quick about the Olympics. So, I mean, that's obviously such a cool opportunity to be able to represent your country and participate in an event that the world is watching.
Mm.
What was the training for that like? Preparing for that event. Like, what was the training like going into that season of representing your country in the Olympics?
Yeah, so going into the games, it was by far the best training I've ever done in my life. And it's funny, I was talking to who were asking me, some friends of mine who were asking me I was just in Australia for a duel in the pool. And like, so what stuff do you do? Like, how hard do you train? And I like set that doing pretty much every amount of 50s. And they were like, how? Like, your body allows for you to actually do that every day? I'm like, well, yeah, I've been doing this since I was 14. Like, I've been conditioned to. And so it was cool to see that because I was like, oh, like the kind of training I'm doing is actually like incredibly hard. Because a lot of it, I grew up people writing things in blogs being like, oh, like he just does a bunch of 25s and it's so easy and whatnot. Um, but when I talk to athletes who actually get what we do, they're like, no, like that's intense. So I was pushing almost 90 50s every session at pace. So that's almost 5,000 meters going 200 pace, where most people don't push maybe 1,000 meters at pace a week because they're afraid to go too fast to where their body then can't replicate it when it comes time to race. But what we recognize is the way we train is doing these things repetitively and consistently, we create neural pathways. So yes, it's hard on the body, it fatigues, but that's what we have all these tools of recovery, whether it's ice, blood flow restriction, theraguns, percussion guns, everything. Like we work and we do all that stuff outside of the pool so that we can maintain. And then when it comes time to race, it just happens. So it's one of those things where the way we were working, we were doing a lot and we put a lot in the body. And so it allowed for me to stand up pretty confident in my ability to race. And I think, there were some things at the Olympics that mentally had thrown me off. And, going into my next Olympics, we've got ways to combat that. And we know how to better set myself up for success. And there was a very clear contrast in my performance from Olympic trials to the Olympics. And I think a lot of it had to do with the things, and I'm sure we'll touch on it.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I would love to know more about like what does the training look like outside of the pool? Because I know you can sit here and tell me all these different paces and distances.
Right. Nobody will ever get it.
What else goes into it? Like, are you doing a lot of strength training? Are you running at all? Like, is there cross training involved, or how does that?
So funny enough, going into the Olympics, I was doing no dry land whatsoever.
Wow.
So there was no secondary like strengthening of the shoulders. Everything was all specific to the pool. And the reason we were doing that was one, I had tried this in the past and we've done it on and off for some season. And there was some good things that came out of it, but we noticed more negative. And it was just because we were just kind of building strength and that strength wasn't being converted and applied in the pool. So with swimming, the motions are so specific and the muscles that work the movements are so specific to being efficient that in order to do, whatever lifts and stuff, like you can get strong, but if you don't allow for your body to recover and then apply that into the pool, it's not going to help you swim faster. And you even look at some of the athletes now that are swimming extremely fast. And there's a kid that just broke a world record at 17. He's skinny. He's like really skinny. And like, I'm a pretty skinny guy, but he's skinnier than I am. Like he makes me look jacked. And it's funny because, swimming's all about drag and resistance and then applied force and kind of having this power to weight ratio correct. And it's funny that we only get to that kind of thinking now because technology and science is so advanced, but we still find kids jumping into a college program and just pumping weights and trying to get jacked. And it's like, okay, it works for some events like a 50 free, but anything over that endurance wise, you want to have mobility. And so something we have now started to add outside of the pool is different functional movement programs in terms of extending the lat and allowing for the shoulder to come longer. So it's all about lengthening the stroke, but we're not doing anything with heavy weights. We're very rarely even touching a weight. If anything, it's like 10, 15 pounds, just allowing for, a little bit of resistance, or even using bands. And the reason we like bands is because there's this time under load effect, to where if we can maintain that tension, you're only, creating more strength. But all of the work, I'd say we'd probably put it down to like 80%, 20% is going to be in the pool, converting the muscles from whatever breakdown into strength that will help us swim faster.
Wow. That's fascinating to me. What about nutrition? I know you're eating a ton. Like you hear all the crazy stories about Michael Phelps training for the Olympics.
Right.
Like, 10,000 pancakes a day.
It's so funny. I say this a lot. It's like, I feel like if Phelps was eating like that, he's got to be diabetic now. And so I look at a lot of it, and it's like news, like I don't believe anything they put out anymore. And so it's one of those things I'm like, okay, yes, we eat a lot, we do. But man, if I ate like that, I would not do well. But what we do, and I experimented a bit with, we tried paleo back in the day, we tried keto, and we ended up taking a little bit of things from kind of both. And for me is I try and stay away from super processed carbs, try and keep it relatively clean. And then I have a very like set meal structure. So my mornings is, I always kind of start the day with like 2 or 3 eggs and a coffee before I swim. And then when I come back home, I have about 6 or 7 eggs with some like spicy sausage, because I like the taste of it, get a little bit of fat. I'll throw an avocado in there, maybe a bagel if I'm feeling like carbing up a little bit. And then for lunch, I'll typically have tuna and rice. And the tuna and rice is just that, obviously the protein that comes from the tuna, because I think you're getting about 20 grams of protein per can. So it's about 40 grams of protein right there. And then that's usually a pretty big meal in the middle of the day. And then I'll train again in the evening. And for dinner, I always kind of rotate between either salmon, chicken, or steak with like a potato salad or any sort of, I try and put some greens in there. I'm not a big fan of greens. I rather supplement it with like a green smoothie or something.
Yeah.
But our dinners are always my dinners are always very protein heavy. And a lot of that's just to repair, because we create so much breakdown in the training day that I need the protein to kind of build back the muscle. But yeah, that's kind of, it's very, very simple. Like I don't like to, even my fridge, like I love when my fridge is just like 3 or 4 items, just clean. Like very, very cold, very type A, minimalist type thinking. And same with my closet. Like my fridge is like, it's just all very organized and ready to go. It's just like grab it, eat it.
I love that.
Go to sleep.
I love that, dude. I was telling my mom, my girlfriend, everyone like in my circle, I'm like, I would eat the same thing every single day, every meal. I'm like, I don't have to think about it. Like I know
100%
what I'm getting. I know what I like. I eat clean. I just want to eat the same thing every day. I'm thinking about so much other stuff throughout the day. When I eat, I just want to eat it and move on.
Yeah, I like to say it's funny. So my sister and I are very different in that is she lives to eat and I eat to live. And it's just, she likes the artsy, like looks good, very flavorful, all the spices. And I'm like, just give me a can of whatever, and if it's good for me, I'll eat it. Like,
and then I can go swim again.
Chipotle fanboy. It's like if I could eat a bowl of Chipotle for every meal, I would.
Yes. Chipotle sponsored this episode. No,
please. I've been trying for so long.
No, dude, I feel like we're on the same page there. That's so cool, bro. Do you have one moment, and we'll wrap this up, man. I want to be sensitive to your time, but do you have like one moment, one story from the Olympics that just like really stands out? It's such like it's just something you'll never forget. I'm sure there's got to be something cool there.
Yes, there is. Apart from every single trip to the dining hall being like, oh my goodness, who is that? It's amazing. Like getting to be around so many incredible athletes. And this is, I think, why you have that post-Olympic blue, is because you're just surrounded by excellence.
Yeah.
Um, and it's very motivating, but it's also pretty sad when you come home and you're like, oh, like, I miss watching the Argentinian volleyball team walk past me and tower over me, making me feel like a small child. Like, it's just crazy. And so it's cool. And like, I was in line with Andy Murray constantly. I saw Nyjah Houston a few times and spoke to him. I saw Garbine Muguruza. I saw Djokovic was in the village. You know, none of the gymnasts were there because they got too much money. They were in hotels, and same with the NBA players. But it was just like seeing excellence everywhere was pretty special. But a story that really sticks out, and one I love saying because it gives me chills every time, is this was the night before our relay. So the night before the relay and kind of the morning of the final. Oh, it was the morning. Yeah, it was the morning. And what had happened was we were like, okay, this is our final relay. It's going to be myself, Ryan Murphy, Caleb Dressel, and Zach Apple. What we did is we sat down at this little like flower garden thing. It's kind of gross. It's just dirt, really, in front of our building in the Olympic Village. And we had a meeting before going to bed being like, okay, like, what's our game plan? How are we going to attack this? And we sat down with the coach and we're like, these are the splits we've all gone individually multiple times over this last week of the Olympics. We know we're tired. We know we're hurting, but we only have 100 meters left of racing, and we're going to give it hell, like everything we've got left. Wow. And we know if we just each as an individual come together and swim our average, literally our average of what we've done this week, we're not only going to win out of lane 1, which is already historic in itself, but we're going to break the world record. And we had a lot of pressure because we had never in the history of us attending the Olympics lost this relay. We've always won the medley, except for the one Olympics we had boycotted. And I kind of just, it was cool sitting there knowing like, okay, like we're the best in the world. And I'm the best with these other 3 guys of the US. And this is our best possible relay to go absolutely bonkers on the last night. And we had some tough relay selections and some tough races. So there were highs and lows in the team, but it was up to us to kind of cap things off with a bang. And I remember walking out onto pool deck, not nervous at all, just pure excitement, just knowing that there was no other team out there that could be thinking the way we are. And it was something that's where you've kind of realized too, is like just this power that you hold as a Team USA athlete and the pride and being able to represent your country on that stage. And also, I never really get to swim relays. Like I grew up racing on my own, being my own teammate. And so the only time I get to do a relay is world champs in the Olympics. Like I had to learn how to do a step over relay start at the Olympic training camp. Wow. And I was like, these coaches got to have a lot of faith in me because they've only seen me do the start for a week. And so I picked it up and it went well. And I remember just once the race started, we each did our thing. Murph was 52 low. I was 58 mid. We were each on our fastest kind of splits for the relay. Caleb went crazy, went 49 low. And Zach closed us into a world record. And it was just one of those things where we got to celebrate as a team and to share that moment as a team was really cool because these are guys that, you know, typically are my competitors, but we got to represent the US and have an amazing time getting to just passion and close the meet was pretty special. Yeah, but then that's where it all started, was that night before.
Wow. That's amazing, dude. I mean, it's a cool story. It's cool to see how you guys came together. And again, it's like, I just think that's what the coolest part about the Olympics is, you're doing it for something so much greater. You get to represent the United States and compete in that way. It's so cool.
Absolutely. No, it was really special. And then you get to look up in the stands, and especially this Olympics, like all you saw in the stands were your teammates because there was nobody else. So it was pretty interesting.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I bet that was a unique experience. Man, we'll wrap this thing up. I mean, what does the future for you look like? I know you're going to continue to train. You've got this
Uh-huh.
vision for this project of just tearing down these records. What does that
Absolutely.
look like for you?
Yeah, so we are back into pretty heavy training. I actually fly to Maui this week, this Thursday, for my first channel crossing. So I'm doing a swim from Lanai to Maui with five other swimmers. So it's a little bit of a relay. So it'll be cool. And I've never done like deep water swimming like this. So I hope we can see some sharks or see something cool. But I definitely don't want any. I don't. I'm most nervous of jellyfish. I don't want to be stung by a jellyfish while I swim. But other than that, it's gonna be a cool experience. And then we're back home grinding through end of October, kind of beginning November is World Cups again. And then I go back to Australia for short course world champs, which leads us into 2023, which will be kind of a long course, more of the long course campaign. So my year is done in terms of long course racing. But we're going to be having a lot of cool, fun opportunities just to train and really build up into 2023, which is where we want to start knocking on the door of some pretty big records.
Well, I can't thank you enough
Thank
for
you,
coming on the podcast.
Tanner.
This has been a really fun episode, man, and I just appreciate your time. This has been great.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Let's go. Thank you, man.